Hey everybody, thanks for watching. I got another video for you today. I know it's been a while, but I've been working on a side project for you viewers. That footage will be coming out later this week, as well as will be more ongoing footage of the same style. Anyway, let's go ahead and get right to today. Normally I do a Phase 5, where I go over the 5 articles, or the 5 top stories from this weekend, but today I'm going to be doing something a little different. We have a lot of updates on some older stories that you guys know very well, I'm sure. I've talked about them specifically on this page before, and just some of the COVID updates as well. Alright everybody, we're going to start with an article from Axios. 15 hours ago, CDC report on COVID deaths underlines virus's danger. See, now, I don't really agree with their headline here. It actually sounds more like it underlines the lack of danger that we have here, and something that we actually need to be worried about more, that we've always been worried about, and getting when you're elderly and you get sick. People die. This is no different, really. So, a new Centers for Disease Control report shows 94% of people who died from COVID-19 in the U.S. had contributing health conditions. Yes, but, they state, Australian epidemiologist Gideon Meyerhoutz-Katz, sorry I mispronounced that, it's crazy German, noted in a blog post on Monday that the CDC estimates COVID-19 was the underlying cause of 95% of all deaths. The underlying cause. So, they're saying that basically it is still the cause of their death, but they all were sick of other things too, related to the virus. Only in 5% of deaths has it been listed as a contributing cause. They're talking, I'm hoping that they're talking about people that, like, you know, like the guy who crashed his motorcycle and died and they called it COVID-19. I hope that's who they're talking about. But it says here, our thought bubble via Axios' Sam Baker. This report doesn't mean that COVID isn't bad as we thought. It's clear from CDC statistics on excess deaths that more people are dying than usual because of COVID. The fact that common pre-existing medical conditions often coincide with the deadly coronavirus infections is part of what makes it scary, not a reason to write it off. No, it's just another disease that if you are prone to getting really, really sick, especially if you get sick multiple times a year, then you really need to be watching yourself and doing common health practices, such as not getting into gigantic groups of people where people might be sick, washing your hands regularly, all the things that we were taught as children that are just basic. Anyway, so of note, Twitter removed the post earlier Sunday retweeted by President Trump for violating its rules with false interpretations of the CDC's novel coronavirus data. So the post incorrectly claimed that the CDC had quietly updated its data to admit that only 6% of those listed in the U.S. coronavirus death toll actually died from COVID, and that the other 94% had 2 to 3 other serious illnesses. That's actually died from only COVID. That's actually true. So, yeah, if he had said that CDC had... So, and this is weird because it's all like mixed up in their quotes, so I'm pretty sure that they're misquoting him like they usually do. Actually died from COVID only is probably what he said. I'm not going to say that exactly because I have not looked up his exact speech or the Twitter thing, and nor could I because Twitter removed it. So, and the other 94% had 2 to 3 other serious illnesses. Yes, that is absolutely true. The post by a supporter of a baseless conspiracy theory has been deleted. A reality check, while the cause of death listed and solely from the coronavirus occurred in 6% of the cases in the U.S. from February 1st to August 22nd, this doesn't mean the virus was not a contributing factor or indeed the leading cause in the other 94%. The U.S. virus death toll would be much lower if this were the case. That's exactly what we're saying. The U.S. virus death toll would be much lower. It is not nearly as high. If you look at the amount of people that have died this year comparatively to last year, there's actually less people that have died of influenza and less people that have died of pneumonia. So I think that, yeah, this is exactly what we're saying here, is that those people are actually dying from influenza and pneumonia, and they just had COVID-19 in the background too. Yes, it probably is a contributing factor. It's making pneumonia and influenza a little worse. But that happens. These people, we shut down our entire economy over something that's killing. We didn't do that for HIV. We didn't do that for AIDS. You know, and this is the point is if you take this math correctly, and I've actually gone over to the CDC website, as you can see here, and pulled some of this information. In New Mexico itself, if you do the math on the amount of people that died of underlying condition, or that died with COVID-19 as an underlying condition, while things like influenza and pneumonia were present, that actually makes up 100% of our cases here in New Mexico. Not a single person has died without an underlying condition, as far as I can tell by this information here. Now, some of them are pretty obvious that people would die, like adult respiratory distress syndrome, with or chronic lower respiratory syndrome. 20 people, 85 and plus died. 12, 75 to 84 died. So yeah, that makes sense. But what doesn't make sense is the amount of people that have died from influenza and pneumonia this year comparatively to last year. It's about the same. It's only like 50 people higher. So COVID has made it 50 people worse. This is ridiculous. So if you do the actual numbers, that comes to 0.003% of the population that has actually died of COVID only. 0.003% of the population of COVID only. All the other cases have been with underlying conditions. And the people who've died of COVID only, most of them are still old. They just didn't have any underlying conditions. Healthy old people. But they're still old, and we know what these diseases do to old people. Here's a list of a lot of the diseases the CDC reports as underlying medical conditions related to coronavirus deaths were. The influenza and pneumonia, respiratory failure, those two, okay, that makes sense that COVID actually made those significantly worse, and that COVID could be, the cause of a lot of the deaths with these two. But a lot of those deaths would still have been there. We got to remember that as well. Hypertensive disease. I don't know enough about hypertensive disease, but diabetes, vascular and unspecified dementia, like cardiac arrest, heart failure a little bit, but not even that much. If you haven't taken care of your heart and you're prone to heart failure, there's a lot of things that could have caused your heart attack. Somebody could have scared you too bad. You could have, ran too much. Saying that, basically that is implying that COVID-19 is equal to people with heart disease that go out and do a little too much running. Somebody, say somebody chases them down the street. So COVID-19 is equivalent to somebody chasing somebody with heart disease down the street. Wow, that's ridiculous. So renal failure, intentional, unintentional injury, poisoning, and other adverse events, such as George Floyd. George Floyd was one of those cases. Speaking of George Floyd, we have some new information on him. I think that we're done here. I think we all kind of understand. By the way, that number of actual people is just a little bit above 10,000 that have died from COVID only. While they say 153,000 have died, really only 10,000 have died of COVID only. So let's go ahead and move on to my next thing. Here on CNN, let's get him out of the way. Nobody wants to look at you. They're going to go ahead and report former officer in George Floyd killing asked judge to dismiss charges. What is this? Why would we dismiss those charges? We've heard that these guys are murderers. Well, let's go ahead and look into what CNN has to say. They're not going to say much about this. You know they won't. Former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin has asked a judge to dismiss murder charges against him in death of George Floyd. In court papers Friday, Chauvin's attorney says there is not probable cause to support charges of second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. I've been saying that since the beginning. These charges are way too high for these people. Even if they are going to be convicted of manslaughter, the murder charges is going to destroy this case. So, Floyd's killing sparked protest. Yeah, we already know that. Meanwhile, the prosecutor said Friday that Floyd's killing was so cruel that they want stricter sentences than recommended by state guidelines if Chauvin and the 3 other officers involved are found guilty. Floyd died May 25th. Yeah, we already know that. 8 minutes on his neck. All 4 officers were fired. Mr. Floyd was treated with particular cruelty. The state also argues the case aggravated circumstances because Floyd was particularly vulnerable in handcuffs. Chauvin also wants Hennepin County Attorney's Office disqualified in part because of what Chauvin's attorney calls an inappropriate pre-trial publicity campaign. According to the filing, Cahill has denied a similar request by another former officer. So this is all they really have to say about it. Man, CNN, you're really phoning it in, because if I go over here to ABC News, they've got a serious situation here. Officer charged in George Floyd's death argues drug overdose killed him, not knee on neck. Why didn't CNN mention any of that? So, a defense attorney for the fired Minneapolis police officer charged the murder in connection with the death of George Floyd is asking a judge to drop all charges, arguing the 46-year-old man's death was allegedly from a drug overdose and not caused by the officer planting his knee in the back of Floyd's neck. Nelson contends Chauvin acted on his training from the Minneapolis Police Department in use of the maximal restraint technique. I haven't heard about this before, so if you guys remember, when I initially did a video on this, I was under the understanding that putting your knee on the neck is not the correct position and actually is supposed to go into the small of the back. But we have here that the maximal restraint technique, and did not so out of concern that Floyd might harm himself or other officers struggling to arrest him. The Minneapolis Police Department policy on maximal restraint technique says it shall only be used in situations where handcuffed subjects are combative and still pose a threat to themselves. This man was highly erratic, so yeah, I do agree that he was that he could have posed a threat. Officers or others could significant damage if not properly restrained. Here's the kicker, though. Nelson also included Minneapolis Police Department training materials on the proper use of the maximal restraint technique, in which photos show demonstrations of officers simulating putting their knee on a handcuffed subject's neck. So they were trained that way. Whether it's the correct way or not, that's the way he was trained. Can you really blame the guy for getting it wrong in that case then? When this person, or this George Floyd character, was definitely posing a problem, he asked to be removed from the vehicle. He said he couldn't breathe in the vehicle, and then you put him down on the ground. He's saying he can't breathe still. It's like, well, you know, at this point, restrain him because he's acting very erratic. They've already got an ambulance on the way. So, thus, any risk created by Mr. Chauvin's conduct lies largely with those who train MPD officers and those who approve such training, Nelson wrote in a motion filed on Friday. I agree. Nelson also cited the autopsy conducted on Floyd that found fentanyl and methamphetamine in his system, a combination of drugs Nelson says is known as a speedball. He noted that Hennepin County medical examiner's post-mortem report showed Floyd had just cut that, David. He had hypertensive disease as well, hypertension and sickle cell trait. Floyd also purportedly told the officers that he had contracted COVID-19 and was still positive for the virus at the time of his death, a claim confirmed by his autopsy. So we just saw from the previous case that COVID-19, or at least the CDC seems to think so heavily, is that COVID-19 can really exacerbate hypertension and heart disease. So it's very possible that killed him. And he was on drugs? Yeah. So, put simply, Mr. Floyd could not breathe because he had ingested a lethal dose of fentanyl and possibly a speedball. Combined with sickle cell trait and his pre-existing heart conditions, and COVID, if I may add, Mr. Floyd's use of fentanyl and methamphetamine most likely killed him, Nelson argued. Adding fentanyl and methamphetamine to Mr. Floyd's existing health issues was tantamount to lighting a fuse on a bomb. I absolutely agree, and I think that just lit the fuse on the bomb that's going to blow these riots out of the water. Because remember, George Floyd is what started all this, and now it appears that this man killed himself. Well, it appears so. So based on a lot of the evidence shown, they don't really have any evidence that Derek Chauvin committed murder. So anyway, I've got one more article for you guys, one more update on investigators name officer who shot Jacob Blake. Knife found in Blake's vehicle. All right, so this article says the Wisconsin Department of Justice identified Kenosha police officer that shot Jacob Blake, who allegedly had a knife in his vehicle. This is our man here. The news came Wednesday in a press release from the DOJ. The department's Division of Criminal Investigation is leading the inquiry into the shooting. Officer Rustin Shesky, a 7-year veteran of the Kenosha Police Department, has been placed on administrative leave after firing his gun 7 times at Blake. Blake was leaning into his vehicle where investigators say they later found a knife. Yeah, so he did have a knife in the vehicle. Blake told authorities that he had a knife, DOJ said. It's not clear when Blake said he had the knife. Shesky held Blake's shirt while firing. The officer on leave was the only one who fired a gun. Police tried to use a taser before shooting, but it was not successful in stopping Blake, DOJ said. The press release did not say why the taser failed. Well, they fail regularly all the time. It's actually a pretty common occurrence. I talked about this in the Rayshard Brooks situation, is that they label it as 2 to 3 shots on the website that makes the taser. So, yeah, it's kind of... they don't always work. Sometimes thick clothing, imagine if your shirt is sitting way away from your body and it catches that and can't quite catch it into the skin. There's a lot of issues with the tasers working. The Wisconsin DOJ Division of Criminal Investigation is investigating an officer-involved shooting. In Wisconsin occurred the event Sunday, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, we already know about all that. So, Basically, down here it says, has been a law enforcement officer. During the investigation following his initial incident, Mr. Blake admitted that he had a knife in his possession. DCI agents recovered a knife from the driver's side floorboard of Mr. Blake's vehicle. A search of the vehicle located no additional weapons. So yes, it is quite obvious from the video that I'm sure all of you guys have seen that he was most likely reaching for his knife, and if they gave him any more time, he would have turned around and stabbed the officer. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. Please share this video to help it get out there, and yeah, subscribe to the page if you can. It'll really help me grow and really help these videos keep coming. Eventually, maybe I can make this more of a everyday thing. So, I will see you guys later, and I hope you have a good day.